The apartment was silent, eerily so, with an almost oppressive stillness that seemed to hang in the air, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator, a constant low drone that was oddly comforting in the quiet. Sarah lay in bed, trying to ignore the persistent scratching sound coming from the wall. She had tried everything to drown it out, earplugs, white noise, even music, but nothing worked. It had been happening for weeks, a soft, irregular scraping that always seemed to start after midnight, as if the darkness itself brought it to life. She told herself it was just rats, trying to rationalize the unnerving noise. The building was old, after all, with creaky floors and drafty windows that let in the chill of the night. But the sound never seemed to move, always emanating from the same spot in her bedroom wall, a spot she had come to dread. A shiver ran down her spine, a cold, creeping sensation that made her feel vulnerable and exposed. She pulled the covers over her head, trying to block out the noise, but it seemed to seep through the fabric, relentless and unyielding. Sleep came in fitful bursts, plagued by nightmares of unseen things lurking in the walls, shadows that moved and whispered in the dark. When Sarah finally woke, the sun was streaming through her window, painting the room in a warm glow that felt almost surreal after the long, terrifying night. The scratching was gone, replaced by the familiar sounds of the city waking up, a symphony of life that made the night's horrors seem like a distant memory. As the days turned into weeks, the scratching sound became a nightly ritual, an unwelcome guest that refused to leave. Sarah tried everything to find the source. She checked for rodents, sealed cracks, even hired an exterminator. Each night, she hoped for silence, but it never came. Nothing worked. The sound persisted, a constant reminder that she wasn't alone. It gnawed at her sanity, making her question her own senses. Her once peaceful apartment now felt oppressive, filled with unseen eyes and unheard whispers. The walls seemed to close in on her, the air thick with tension. She started sleeping with the lights on, her phone clutched in her hand, a lifeline to the outside world. Every night was a battle against the unknown. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of curtains sent her heart racing. The familiar sounds of her home had turned into a symphony of terror. Sarah's friends noticed her growing anxiety. They saw the dark circles under her eyes, the way she jumped at the slightest noise. They suggested she move, but she couldn't imagine leaving her home. The thought of abandoning her sanctuary was unbearable. This was her sanctuary, her safe space. Every corner held memories, every room a piece of her life. She refused to let some unexplained noise drive her away. She was determined to reclaim her peace, to find a way to silence the dread. Little did she know the truth was far more sinister than she could have ever imagined. The scratching was not just a sound, it was a harbinger of something dark. The scratching wasn't just a nuisance, it was a sign, a warning that something was terribly wrong. And soon she would come face to face with the source of her dread. One particularly unsettling night, after a particularly loud scratching episode, Sarah decided to investigate further. She examined the wall, running her hands over the rough surface, searching for any irregularities. Her fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. It was a small, almost invisible latch, cleverly concealed by peeling paint. Her heart pounded in her chest. With trembling hands, she flipped the latch and pushed against the wall. To her astonishment, a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a dark, narrow opening. A musty, stale odour wafted from the opening, sending chills down Sarah's spine. It was a crawl space, hidden from view, leading into the unknown depths of the building. Fear warred with curiosity. What was this place? And what had been making that horrifying sound? Armed with a flashlight and a growing sense of dread, Sarah cautiously entered the crawl space. The air was thick and heavy, filled with the smell of dust and decay. The passage was cramped, forcing her to crawl on her hands and knees. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light, she made a shocking discovery. The crawl space wasn't empty. In the far corner, nestled amongst cobwebs and debris, lay a pile of blankets and clothes. Someone had been living here, right under her nose. Panic surged through Sarah. Who was living in her walls? How long had they been there, and what did they want? She had to get out of there, to call the police, but as she turned to leave, her flashlight beam illuminated something else, something that made her blood run cold. Section 5. Signs of Life. It was a small, makeshift shrine. Candles flickered, casting dancing shadows on the dirt walls. Photographs were pinned up, faded and yellowed with age, and in the centre a single, chilling item, a doll, its porcelain face cracked and stained, staring blankly into the darkness. The sight sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. This wasn't just a hiding place, it was someone's home, someone who took the time to create, to worship, to exist in this suffocating space. Sarah's mind raced. Who was this person? And why were they living in her walls? The scratching sound suddenly took on a new, terrifying meaning. It wasn't random, it was a way of communicating, of reaching out. But why? Section 6. The Intruder's Belongings. With a growing sense of unease, Sarah examined the belongings scattered around the crawl space. There were books, their pages yellowed and brittle, clothes worn and faded, and a collection of strange trinkets, a tarnished silver locket, a chipped teacup, a worn leather-bound journal. Each object whispered a story, offering a glimpse into the life of the person who called this space home. Sarah picked up the journal, its pages filled with spidery handwriting. As she read the words, a terrifying truth began to dawn. The journal entries spoke of loneliness, of isolation, of a desperate longing for connection. But there was something else, a dark undercurrent of obsession, of a desire for something more, something sinister. Section 7. A chilling realization. As Sarah delved deeper into the journal, she began to recognize the name mentioned repeatedly, her own. The writer spoke of her in familiar terms, describing her daily routine, her habits, her fears. It was as if the writer knew her intimately, had been watching her, studying her. A chilling realization washed over Sarah. She wasn't just living with a stranger. She was living with someone who was obsessed with her, who saw her not as a person but as an object of fascination, a prize to be coveted. The scratching sound, once a source of fear, now seemed like a love song, a serenade from a stalker lurking in the shadows. The thought sent a wave of nausea through her. She had to escape, to get help before it was too late. Section 8. Face to Face. As Sarah scrambled back through the crawl space, her heart pounded in her chest. She emerged into her bedroom, gasping for air, her clothes covered in dust and cobwebs. She had to call the police to get out of the apartment, but before she could reach for her phone, she heard a noise behind her, a soft, shuffling sound. She whirled around, her blood turning to ice. Standing in the doorway, illuminated by the faint light filtering in from the hallway, was a figure, a woman, her face gaunt and pale, her eyes burning with an unsettling intensity. In her hand, she clutched the cracked porcelain doll from the shrine. "We don't have to be strangers anymore," the woman whispered, her voice raspy and filled with longing. "We can be together always." Section 9. The Woman Left Behind. The police never found any trace of the woman who had been living in Sarah's walls. They searched every corner, every crevice, but it was as if she had vanished into thin air. They treated it as a possible break-in, a squatter case. The officers speculated about her identity, but no one could provide any concrete answers. But Sarah knew the truth. She had felt the woman's presence, sensed her watching from the shadows. She had seen the obsession in the woman's eyes, the way they bore into her with an intensity that was both unsettling and heartbreaking. The desperate need for connection had twisted into something dark and dangerous, a longing that had turned into a haunting. Sarah moved out of the apartment, hoping to leave the nightmare behind. She packed her belongings with a heavy heart, each item a reminder of the terror she had endured. But the experience left an indelible mark on her psyche. The memories clung to her, refusing to fade. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of unseen eyes following her every move. Every creak, every rustle sent shivers down her spine. The sensation of unseen eyes following her every move became a constant companion, a shadow she couldn't escape. The scratching sound continued to haunt her dreams, a constant reminder that some secrets are best left buried. Night after night she would wake up in a cold sweat, the sound echoing in her mind. It was a reminder that some secrets are best left buried, that some mysteries are too dangerous to uncover. And somewhere out there in the shadows of the city, the woman with the cracked porcelain doll was still searching. Her quest was far from over. The woman with the cracked porcelain doll was still searching, driven by a longing that could never be fulfilled. Driven by a longing that could never be fulfilled, a love that could only exist in the darkness. Her search was endless, her desire insatiable. A love that could only exist in the darkness, a connection that was forever out of reach.